Hello and welcome to Women in Post, a podcast and web series for women in post-production by Women in Post-Production. Today on the show, we'll be speaking with Bettina.
If you can help anybody else and keep your mind open to what opportunities out there and who you can match to those opportunities, that is always going to help you.
So Bettina, you've been editing for 12 years now, or in production and post-production?
I've been in post-production since before I graduated grad school.
How did you get involved in editing?
So originally the plan was supposed to become a high school English teacher. And I realized I really don't like teaching. And then it became a problem. Like, what do you do with an English degree? And I decided I would go to film school. But I didn't think anybody would take me. So I did a year internship in DC with the film company. And then I applied to grad school and I went to Chapman. And when you go to Chapman University, it's in Orange, they ask you which discipline do you want to be, because it's a conservatory. So you have to list everything that you want, like in order. And I only knew about directing, so of course everybody wants to be a director. So I put that first. But at my internship, I worked primarily with editors, and I thought it was really cool what they were doing. And, you know, at that time, like right now, editing software is like available to everybody and people are very familiar with it at a very young age. At that time, that was not the case. So it was all like magic to me. So I thought, oh, like that would be my number two. And I didn't get into the directing program, which is great because I love editing. So I got into the editing program. I started at Chapman, found it incredibly difficult. I was convinced it's like, oh, this is the first time I'm going to flunk out of school because
oh my gosh.
Because if you don't know the software, like you've never interfaced with anything like that, you know, it's like sound and picture are different and you can like move them independently of each other. Like that blew my mind. But, you know, like having been an English major, like story is what I'm strongest in. And so my love is taking what's been shot and potentially elevating it to even something better because I've cut it together or I have a different perspective that somebody else hadn't thought of yet. And so that's effectively like how I got into editing was like on accident, but pretty perfectly.
That's awesome. So what do you edit in now?
Right now, I'm an assistant editor on Showtime's Work in Progress. We're in hiatus. They just gave us a season 2, so the writers are writing, and it comes back in August, and the new season will air probably sometime next year.
That's very exciting. So how does it work when you're on hiatus? Do they continue to pay you? Do they give you like information on what the show is going to be in the coming season? Like how involved are you?
So I live in Chicago right now, but in the past, in like the last, from 2005 to 2017, I lived in LA. So post is different in Chicago and LA. In LA, once you get to a certain point, your show may go on hiatus, which is fine, but you jump onto another show. Like, and sometimes your schedule doesn't meet up with the original show and you can't necessarily go back to it. You just go from show to show to show. In Chicago, Work in Progress is the only scripted TV show out here. So,
really?
Yes. And I was very lucky and I got onto it and I love it and the people are wonderful. But for me, taking the time off, I think other people would do independent projects and everything. For me, I also have 2 kids and post-production is incredibly time-consuming and demanding. So when I'm on hiatus, that's my time to be mom and wife and daughter and friend. It's like when I'm working, I'm not throwing parties. I'm seeing my kids in the morning and night. I'm racing all through the weekend to prep for the next week. So, you know, it's one of the reasons we chose to leave LA at the time that we did was work-life balance became very difficult. And coming to Chicago and seeing what options were here seemed at least something we should try. So I've done a lot of heavy visual effects shows. And especially if you have a tight schedule, you're just going nonstop. And I would, for example, prepare continuities on the weekend just so that it's one less thing that I don't have to think about. I had to do less of that as I became more experienced. I did that on my first show because I was learning and everything was hard and everything took a long time. But for example, on this show, I never did work on the weekends for that. So it's all like trying to, get the laundry done, get dinners made on the weekend, like all the stuff that you're like, as a working mom, trying to, balance and still get done.
For sure. So when you're working on the show, is there ever opportunities that you get to edit from home, or do you always go into an office?
I always go into an office. I would, oh my gosh, if I could edit from home. I know editors that do. I know editors that will have the footage copied over and, they'll take the footage home and keep working on it. As an assistant, currently I'm an assistant editor. My job is to support the editor. And while I believe at some point we will get there where they're going to want you to work from home because it's going to save them overhead on office space and things like that. I don't know if the technology is there yet, but I do think there are security concerns. They don't necessarily want footage off premises. So my job is to support the editor. I'm there first. I organize the footage as to how he or she likes it, and then I organize their paperwork, and then I'm there to do whatever else is necessary. So that might mean once the editor is done with a scene that they hand it back to me and I sound design it, or it might mean that I output an episode for other people to watch, or it might mean that we're locked and I have to do turnover. So I need to be on premises for that.
Wow, you've really covered that very thoroughly. Every follow-up question, you just went right into it, man. Okay. Well, why don't we take this opportunity to listen to the clip that you sent over? Is that okay? All right, let's pull that up here.
Previously on Work in Progress.
You're suicidal? This bitch at work, she's like, I went to Costco and got you almonds. Almonds were what pushed me over the edge.
This is my sister's number.
Can I buy you a drink sometime? I'm a trans man.
That's Julia Sweeney.
Hi, Abby. You just ate a day of my life.
You're gonna have to explain that to me.
I killed my therapist! Are you fucking kidding me?
All right, so thank you for sharing that clip with us. Can you tell me just a little bit about why you chose that clip and kind of what went into your creative decision making?
Oh, sure. I chose that clip because as an assistant editor, often there's not like my work that's permanent. So if I do sound design on a scene, that's usually Temp. The professional sound designer will come in and do a much better version of what I did. But this is a recap that I actually cut. And it's got a funny story because I was working with a team that had never done recaps before. On previous shows, like recaps are like the bane of everybody's existence because it has to communicate the information and everybody has an opinion as to whether or not that's actually working. And sometimes people think recaps are really tedious and so they won't look at it or they'll wait till the very last minute and then they'll get hung up on it and it's just ridiculous. So I find it easier to cut a recap together if I have music to carry the separate clips along because otherwise, you're just throwing information at the viewer and nothing is really connecting, whereas the music is what's connecting it. So my intention with this recap was to cut just something rough together because I assumed my editor was going to cut the real recap and to give it to our composer, the awesome Ethan Stiller, and give it to him like as an example, like, hey, can you create some short little 30-second pieces of music? And, here's like a template of a recap. And I didn't even put very much work into it because to me, this was an exercise to get Ethan going. And then I saw my editor show it to the director who then started giving me notes. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't think anybody was going to look at this. Let me do it like a nice version. And, it was fun because Work in Progress is a lot of people's like first scripted television show on this show. So everybody is excited for every part of the process. Nobody's tired of it. Nobody's sick of recaps. So they all took the recaps really seriously. And it was fun to put that together because you're trying to remind the audience of the story points from the previous episode that are pertinent to this episode. So sometimes you choose a clip and it's very clear in your mind why you chose it. And then the audience, your director or editor was watching it and they're like, why is that in there? It's like, oh, because it relates to this other thing. And then it's very clear to them. But it was fun. It was a fun exercise on the show because everybody was so excited about it. And it's something that I've done that doesn't get changed. It's like,
Nice.
I got it. And that, it gets to the finishing line pretty much the way it is. And if there are notes, they give it to me. What I do is prep, and what I do is temp work. So I might do a temporary visual effect, or I might do a temp sound design. And like, if it's a visual effect, it could be like, replacing a green screen. And my job is to make it as realistic as possible. So on my previous show, we couldn't use Google, but it was like a search engine thing. And nobody ever shot like a search engine to fill the green screen. And nobody had so it seemed like it was going to be done at the very end. But for the temp, version, you need something in the screen. So I just took my iPhone and I took like video of me Googling what would have been appropriate. And then I found web pages that were similar to what the end product would look like. And I temped those into the green screen computer monitors on the shot. So it was funny because when the director came in, I think he was the DP of the show and he got to direct an episode. I asked, did he say anything about that thing that I shot? Because, it's not something he shot. And the editor was like, no, he didn't say anything. So effectively, my temp work is a template for the visual effects people, right? They'll mimic what I did because that's what everybody's seen at this point. So like the speed at which my Google search was, they'll mimic that. And like how whatever web page I loaded, they'll make it similar looking. They won't make it exactly the same, but it'll look similar to that. So everything I do is a guide for the finishing teams.
Okay, gotcha. Does the actor ever see that? If they're like on their phone swiping through something, do they just see a green screen on their phone? Yeah.
You're matching the visual effects company will match their movement. Like if they need to hit a button. So like on our show Work in Progress, we lift is constantly being used. And so at one point, Abby gives the driver 4 stars. It's a total green screen. So the graphic is matched to hit, the stars are put where her finger hits it.
Is that hard to do?
I don't do it. So I don't,
Gotcha. So what would you say is maybe the hardest thing that you've ever had to do or had to make a decision about?
I mean, the hardest thing was becoming an assistant editor. At the time I was trying to transition from post-producing to assistant editing, I was really uncomfortable asking for help, and there's really no way to get trained. And somebody once told me, just get the job and learn the job on the job and just lie. I was like, that is not my personality. And having now learned the job, I have no idea how I would have done that. There's no way. I needed somebody to teach me. And I was very, even though I went to school for editing and I learned the software, I was still deeply uncomfortable with technology. And I kind of feel like maybe that's a product of being a woman, in the early aughts. Because I feel like now kids have iPhones and, smartphones, and they're constantly on, and they connect very quickly as to how technology works. Like my kid, I was surprised the few times he's had my phone, how quickly he picked up on, swiping and, how to manipulate it. So get that back to me. You're too young for that.
Yeah.
So the technology was really intimidating. I felt like I had to know everything before I could get a job, and that none of that is true. Every show is different. Every show you have to sort of learn something new, and it's fine. And people are usually very patient. And now with things like Facebook, there are so many groups you can be a part of. And if something stumps you, you can put the question out there. And more likely than not, someone has come across the same problem and can shoot you an answer. And I have much less techno fear now, but that was, between no solid way of getting trained and being very technophobic, that was 2 things in myself that I had to really work past. So like something that I try to do is if I know someone wants to learn, if the show okays it, I will let people shadow me, because I feel like part of my way of giving back to the people who's always given me breaks and giving me help is to pay it forward. And what I felt like I lacked was that encouragement, like, yeah, come shadow me. Like, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be fine. Like, I just didn't feel like I had gotten that I had to really ask for, and it was very difficult to ask. So if I hear anybody has some kind of interest, I'm just like, do you want to come follow me? I'll cut my producer. Yeah. And then
Great.
I have all these tools, and I write up a lot of instructions, and I'll email those things as I'm teaching them through the day. And I don't know that anybody walks out of my bay like ready to assist, but I feel like I've maybe made it more accessible to them. Whereas when I was starting out, I felt like it was this big mysterious thing that I would never get to do, but I desperately wanted to do.
Uh-huh. So would you say that your degree then was essential in getting a job, or is that not a requirement anymore?
I don't think so. I have a master's in film production, and you definitely do not need a master's degree to do my job. I will say that having an English degree and having gone through the program, for me, I think it's made me a better editor and storyteller. My English degree, I spent 4 years analyzing stories. And so I have a very, like, I would say of all my skill set, my strongest is story. Like, if there's, like, I've pitched ideas on shows that have gotten implemented. I can argue if something doesn't feel right, like, very confidently about story. And the film degree, I went into wanting to do this with absolutely no background in it. And so getting all of that information to me was super helpful. Like, I think you can pick that stuff up if you work in the industry. Certainly most people don't have a master's. But as a person who likes to have as many tools in our toolbox, that was really helpful. And honestly, the way I got my foot in the door was through a professor who listened to me talk about how much I love Battlestar Galactica. And the next week brought in his friend who was a writer on Battlestar Galactica.
Oh my God.
And then I had because this was like a 7 a.m. class, and this guy, this writer, his name is David Weddle. David drove from Malibu to Orange to hit a 7 a.m. class to talk to us. And I was like, I hope he notices me and like gives me an opportunity, and nobody ever notices me. So then I was like, I have to like figure out a way if I can get on this show. So then I had the class sign a thank you note to David. And in the note, I was like, if there's anything I can do on this show, please let me know. I love it so, because I love the show. It was my favorite show. And then David called my professor, his name is Paul Cedor, and was like, is she crazy? Or like, if I give her an opportunity, will it be a good thing? And Professor Cedar, he recommended me. And I got an internship on Battlestar Galactica. And that internship led to every other opportunity. So, and that was because I went to film school, right? Because like my professor happened to know somebody on my favorite TV show. So I mean, if somebody said to me like, should I go to film school to be in television? It's like, I graduated with 60 grand in debt. So yeah. That was not cheap. At the same time, I felt like it really set me up for success in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. So many people move to LA to do their jobs, and when they bring a family with them and don't have other family out there, like that sounds like such a nightmare. How do you balance that?
Yeah, that was one of the reasons we came back to Chicago. Our families are both here, and it was very difficult having kids and not having childcare, like in terms of parents. Now, there are certain things I didn't realize that I now realize. So we ended up buying a condo before we had children in a lower socioeconomic area, because at the lowest point of the recession, that's what we could afford, which is great. Like, you know, now LA is out of the recession. When we sold the condo, we made a profit and things. But as a parent with children, not being in a great socioeconomic area made it difficult to find quality childcare.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came time to figure out whether we would stay in LA or move, I remember feeling like so much anxiety, because I was like, oh my gosh, if we move away from Rosa, who was one of our babysitters, like, who's going to watch my kids? Like, it was this, like, she was a person I trusted 100%. And if we moved, it would be like an hour away from her. And it just, like, because all these emergencies and things happen, and it's so hard when you're in post or anything, like, to get away.
Absolutely.
And what I didn't realize was that, because now I live in Chicago, like in a suburb of Chicago, and I live in a much better socioeconomic area, there is so much more quality childcare at my disposal. So, like, we found it was an expensive preschool, but it was a great preschool that I totally trusted everybody in. And this is a big deal, because at my first daycare, my oldest son got a concussion and they tried to lie about it.
Oh my gosh.
And, like, every time I think about it, like, I was always not feeling quite right about that daycare. And I kept putting myself down that I was too picky and I was too scared and I was a new mom, blah, blah, blah. And then this happened. And thank God he's fine. But to this day, I have that, like, guilt about it.
Yeah.
And, like, so the preschool here was amazing. My kids go to elementary school now, and they have after school care, which is awesome. I trust all those people. So I think what I would tell Bettina of 2015, 2016, when I was stressing out about all this, it's like, if you can move to a better socioeconomic area, your childcare options dramatically improve,
Mm-hmm.
because there's other people there who also are in the same boat as you, and they also want quality. And it's just not something, I just felt like, oh my God, if we move away from Rosa, we have nothing. And that's not, that's just not true. I mean, family and friends and babysitters, they're great, but I just didn't realize the quality, difference.
Yeah, it's crazy how, like, as a mother, those things haunt you. Like, everybody, they keep telling you, oh, it's okay, you didn't know, they're fine, but like, you can never quite really let it go.
Oh my gosh. Like, something happens with my son, I'm like, oh, is this because of the concussion?
Right.
Is he throwing a temper tantrum because that part of his brain was damaged? Probably not.
Right,
but
yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like every mom has one of those about their kid. Probably everybody, because I know I do.
Yeah.
So do you think that childcare, and this is I guess it's kind of off topic, but I find it super relevant. I hope some other people do too.
I'm sure.
Do you think that the childcare issue affects how many women can work in post-production in LA,
Yes.
in California?
100%. Yes. So many people have to drop out or stop. And for me, this is like a really hot button issue, because I feel like there is so much work right now. There's a really big bubble, which I don't know if that's the right term, because that seems like it's going to burst. But the point is, there's a lot of work in post-production right now. And what infuriates me is that there's no job sharing mechanism. So if I'm on a heavy visual effects show, I can work anywhere from 60 to 90 hours a week. And that is really difficult, especially when you have younger kids, especially, and it doesn't even matter if they're younger. When they're older, it, like, is going to be an issue too, because there needs to be some involvement. And I just would always talk about, like, I wish there was a job sharing mechanism. I wish, because that would be a way to train people. Like, there's no training, right? That would be a way to help people lead more balanced lives, and it would be a way for me to work year round, because my other option was to work year round and never see my kids. So, I love working. It makes me a crazy person not to work. So, like, having an 8-month hiatus is not, like, for me, the best mental health option. But it is a way of, because the costs of living are lower here, like we can make it work that I don't work 8 months out of the year, which we could maybe make it work in LA, but like we'd have a much smaller house and like no yard, So it's sort of like, it's hard to make it all work all the time. Maybe the trick is to make some of it work some of the time and try to hit the different areas in your life as much as possible. Mm-hmm. But I would say post-production is not family friendly. It makes it very difficult, especially on women. I felt like on one of my shows, when I had childcare issues and I had to leave, it was like, oh, because she's the woman. Mm-hmm. But like a male editor couldn't come in on a weekend because his wife couldn't take care of the kids. And it's like, what a great dad. And so, that's just this
double standard
perception, right? And it's very hard in LA to make work-life balance work.
Well, they kind of know like how much work needs to go into their show, right? It's probably not the first time they've produced an episode. They know that people are putting in 60 to 90 hours a week. Why not just hire 2 people? Is it just like a monetary like inconvenience for the show, or?
There's some of that. Some of it is it's just not structured that way. A friend of mine, he and I were talking about it, and he would have loved to have, like, he would have been fine with that, having 2 assistant editors and having a switch off back and forth. He's also younger, and he also has a family, and he also knows the cost of doing the hours. Whereas an older editor I spoke about this to was like, I would hate that because he just wants it easy. He wants 1 assistant editor. He doesn't want to have to manage 2 people. He doesn't want to have to, deal with that. And then from a union standpoint, the contract is written so that it's 1 position to 1 assistant editor. So that becomes an issue too, because there are benefit questions. I mean, these are things that can all be worked out. But another thing is people are afraid that producers will take advantage of it because a lot of people do want the massive amounts of overtime. For some people, it's what they need to support their families. For some people, it's how they live their lives. They'll work really intensely on crazy projects and then take the rest of the year off. So there are some people there is a fear that if there is an option to save money on overtime, they hire 2 people instead of somebody who wants that gig for the overtime, then that's a way of taking work away and taking monetary earnings away. So there's a lot of different facets to the problem.
Okay. That's very interesting.
I feel like there are people who get really in their own heads, which is what I did. And I was going to suggest certain things they could do to break in. Okay. And one thing that I did is like, I let everybody and their mother know that I wanted to be an assistant editor, because if you don't act like, I think sometimes people wait to be like discovered, and people are busy and there are so many things demanding your attention that unless you make people know what you want, it's hard for people to think of you in that way. So I would let everybody know, and eventually I got my break. The other thing that I would tell people is like, whatever job you do, if you get your foot in the door in any way, like PA or, assistant or whatever, do the best job that you can, because that is showing the people that may hire you for a future position, you are worth the investment. You are worth the time, you're worth taking a chance on. You're worth the investment of training you, and that you will make them look good, which is a big deal, because if somebody gives you a shot and you don't look good, that's, you don't do a good job, and they've just thrown their credibility out the window. Yeah. We already talked about the Facebook thing. I was going to say like how much that was so helpful to me, having Facebook groups, because like on my first job, I was very lucky in that a friend of mine, his name is Matthew Gilna. Matthew and I started at the very same time, and Matthew was super experienced. So he trained me, and my editor came to me and told me, I want you to do this thing. And so I went to Matthew. I was like, oh, how do I do this? And Matthew's like, oh, there's no way to do that. And I just went back to my editor. I was like, Matthew, who knows everything, says it's not possible. And my editor was like, no, it's possible. My last editor did it, or my last assistant did it. And you need to figure it out. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, if Matthew doesn't know, how am I ever going to learn this? So it was a Friday night. The next night, I brought in my baby. I set my baby up in another office with a monitor. I got online and I got onto my Avid program and I just posted the question. And it was Saturday night. Like, I did not expect, to solve this problem. But people were online and they took me step by step by step. And I practiced and I understood what the theory was. And I wrote up a set of instructions for myself. And come Monday morning, my editor's like, did you figure it out? I was like, yes, I did. Because, if it was and I didn't get paid for that or anything, like to come in or anything. It was just like on my own time with my baby in tow, this is what I had to do.
Yeah.
And that was super helpful because I know people like bag on Facebook right now, and there's a lot of shady things that Facebook lets happen, but it is such a resource. And like, I'll see in these forums, like, I'm tired of Facebook. Can we move this onto another platform? It's like, no, like, because I have so many groups that I can get help from, and in turn, if there's a question out there that I can help, I will jump on that and try to help as much as I can. So, and then what I always tell people is like, I don't think there is a reason to compete for work, especially if you're in LA. Like, I don't think you need to backstab each other to get that next promotion. Like, in my opinion, there's a rising tide. It should lift all boats. If you can help anybody else and keep your mind open to what opportunities out there and who you can match those opportunities, that is always going to help you in the long run, because people see you as a person that's helped them, and then you'll stick out in their mind as somebody that needs help. So being a mother of two, I have a lot of anxiety about, like, I need to be able to financially provide for them. And moving to Chicago was an extremely difficult decision. And I was here and I was talking to a friend who I'd gotten started and scripted. And I was like, God, I have this fear that my husband will like die in a snowy car crash. And then I'm going to have to like prostitute myself to make it.
Oh my God. That's right. Because you don't have snow in LA.
Right. And so like, there's this like, I'm like a disaster imaginer. And he was like, Bettina, as long as Greg, which is another friend of ours, and I have a job, you have a job. Like he was like, stop worrying about this. And it was that goodwill that I had built because I had helped him get into scripted, which, really dramatically improved his earning power. And he wanted to be in scripted. He didn't want to be in reality. And just to me, like, if you are trying to get somewhere, even if like you can't do everything for everybody, if you can help some people out, I think eventually that comes back and helps you. And I don't think it's like, I'm not saying do it from like a self-serving point of view, but like be a person, care about people. And it's, it's just going to help you in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that a lot of like in just different work situations outside of editing, because I haven't always been an editor. But there always seems to be amongst women this idea that there's only room for one of us. And I don't know where that comes from. Right.
Yes.
Have you felt that before too?
No, I don't. I mean, I will say,
not like you're responsible for pushing that feeling on somebody else. Maybe it's not as much a thing in the creative field.
I mean, no, I think it can be. I have worked with two women who are one generation older than me that were like so difficult to work with. And it was like, why are they so mean? And I cry very easily and all this other nonsense. And I think people were mean to them and they needed to be really tough, in that generation. And that sort of became part of their way of dealing with things. I know like when I see another woman in post-production, I was like, oh, but I'm the woman, but not in like I have to get rid of them sort of way, but like, what? There's more than one of me, like that. But I never, in my opinion, it's never been like, I have felt because of those two like really difficult women that I work with. At one point I was like, I'm never going to work with a woman again because like I can, for some reason I get along with guys better. And there's not this like level of like crazy making that to me is unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And then I had to take a job with this woman. Her name is Jessica Hernandez. And I had to take it and we didn't know each other. And I love her. I love her so much. She's like a big sister to me. And I'm so glad that I had taken that job because it got me off that like feeling of like I can't work with women for some reason. And because she is very relaxed and she is very calm and not crazy making. So it was good because it gave me a different like data point and like it made me stop like also feeling anxious about working with women, like because it's like two really, bad experiences. And for me, it's like, I'm a hard worker. Like I try to be really pleasant. Like, why am I getting in trouble nonstop? And it was just, a work environment. So in my mind, that's never a thing. That can only be one. And for me, it's all about like, I don't care if you're a guy, girl, what race, creed, sexual orientation you are. My thing is like, how can we all help each other? Because we work these long hours and you want to be in a pleasant situation. Like it's so miserable when you have to work really long hours and the work situation is also terrible. So like, what can we do? Like I will bring brownies in, cookies in, like I will do like, if there's like a holiday like Valentine's Day, I go to the dollar shop and buy everybody like some little gift and leave it on their desk before they get in. Because one of my friends is like, oh, you're such a mom. It's like, this is not a mom thing. This is like how do we build connections between ourselves? Because if I'm connected to someone and I feel genuine affection for them, I'm going to work way harder for that person because I'm so motivated to protect them and take care of them. And I think the reverse is also true. If you like me and, you find value in me, you're going to also put, that work into that relationship. So I think because post is so intense, because it's such long hours, like building that relationship with as many people around you as you can is so important. And like by the end, if things go right, you feel like a little family, which I love.
Yeah, for sure. So what are you looking forward to maybe in the next month or two, maybe the next couple of years? What's the next step for you?
I'm hoping to make the bump to editor. And then I would also at some point love to write for television. I like the idea of it's the collaborative aspect of it. I don't think I'd be a good like feature film writer. I like the idea of like all of us. I mean, I don't know. This is like a really romanticized vision because I've never been in a writer's room. But in my mind, it's like there's a team and we figure out the story together and then we workshop the story. Like that is a very lovely image. And then now that my husband and I are more settled and grounded and we have some different ideas and perspectives as to like how to make everything work, there is a question about, do we move back to LA? Because Chicago is wonderful and I love the people I work with. At the same time, from my career path, because there's such few options, and I think things more post-production may come to Chicago. There's a lot of production. There's all the Chicago shows. There's a lot of stuff, but then all the footage gets shot back to LA to be cut. Work in Progress is the first show that's shot here and finished here. So it's very unique.
I mean, this might be a silly question, but why would they do that? I mean, why not just bring some editors here? How expensive could that possibly be versus like sending all this footage all over the place?
A lot of people live in LA, a lot of the creatives, and it's gotten to be, it's not cost prohibitive to send the footage. So like one of my shows was shot in South Africa and the footage was shot back to LA. So, imagine that. Like, so why would they, and the talent pool is in LA. Not that like the Chicago editors aren't talented, but like, my editor that I assisted on Work in Progress, he's actually by trade a commercial editor. Work in Progress was his first television show because he cut the pilot. So he was asked on to be editor. And he is great. He's great at his job. And he, the commercial editing skills totally translated to the television editing skills. But, I don't think a lot of people are going to necessarily trust their babies to somebody who hasn't done it. So but there's a new tax credit. And now that work in progress is here, I could see other productions starting up here, or like the creatives behind work in progress doing other TV shows. Mm-hmm. So I'm in this place where like I'm waiting and seeing, like, is this a place where, I'm trying, like, for me, work and family are like the two fundamental parts of myself. And if I can't have one, like I'm out of balance as a person. So if I can't have my family, that makes me crazy. If I can't have my work, that also makes me crazy. So what do I do to have both? But I also would love, ideally, to progress in my work. Like when we left LA, in my mind, I was like, well, if it has to be that I have to be an assistant editor for the rest of my life, so be it. And I can still make that work. But as a person who loves what I do, I would like to progress. So we'll see. Wow.
I can totally relate to that in so many ways, but it doesn't relate to editing, so I can't really go into it. But
what do you do?
So I used to work in the Fed before I became an editor in the federal government.
Oh, okay.
So my job actually took me to the East Coast, and when I moved,
where do you live now?
Well, now I'm south of Chicago, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm in Bloomington by ISU.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're probably pretty close. I mean, I drive to Sydney all the time. My parents, I grew up in Cook County, but spent the past 10 years in Virginia in the DC area.
Okay.
So my first real job was on this island off the coast of Virginia called Wallops Island, and it was beautiful. I loved it, but it was like an assistant position, right? So I wanted to move up. Because who doesn't want to move up and, get more for their family and provide and all that and advance their skills. So I took a job at the Federal Register, which is part of the National Archives. And just the commute to and from work was an hour each way. And the hours, and you have to take an hour lunch, even if you don't need it. And I would leave and my baby would still be sleeping, and I would get home and he'd be home for he'd be in bed for the night. So I was missing everything, right?
Yeah.
So we made the decision that I would stay home and my husband would go to work. And that's kind of how things got flipped. And I became the entrepreneurial editor kind of phase of my life started about there, which I'm really grateful for. But so anyway, we're really close, Chicago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we should meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this podcast is like a wonderful idea. When I saw you post it, I was like, why didn't I think of that? There's a lot of resources for women, and I think this could be a fantastic resource. And I saw all these people respond to you. Like Liza Cardinale is somebody that responded to you. I worked with her. She's wonderful. So
wow.
I really think this could just, I think you could get sponsorship and you could monetize this and really take this far.
That would be great. I mean, I try to be really humble about it. I think I'm talking to a lot of people like yourself who have a lot more experience than I do. So I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes it's beginner questions. But everybody's got to learn sometimes. And if I'm the one responsible for making the other person look like the smartest person in the room, I mean, that's a good job to have, I think. So I like doing it. I think as editors, we do that too. Our job is to make the people on the screen look good, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I mean, you have answered so many questions, provided so much insight. I don't even know what to say. It totally blew my mind. So thank you
if you
so
think
much.
of anything else, I'm happy to come back on and answer any other questions if something else comes up.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this week's episode, give us a like, leave us a question or comment, and share with your friends. Your viewership and support helps promote women working in film. Follow us on Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube, and join our Patreon community. Interested in being a guest or sponsor on the show? Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. See you next week on Women in Post.